Good afternoon. I'll be chairing this session. There will be 4 talks. And because we are out of time, maybe I just say basic information. Our first speaker is Dr. Halina Pszeniczkina, Association Professor, Dnipro Academy of Music, Ukraine, but also Institute of Lithuanian Literature and Folklore, Vilnius, Lithuania. She will give her presentation entitled Traditional Ritual Songs from Zvenyhorodszczyna, Central Ukraine in the footsteps of academician Ahataniel Krymski investigations. It is especially interesting for me, really, because it's not well-known topic in Poland. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for possibility to give my paper at this wonderful conference the second time. The figure of Ahataniel Krymski is one of the most prominent and at the same time one of the most tragic in Ukrainian intellectual history. Although numerous studies have been devoted to his biography, personality, and scholarly legacy, his name still remains on the margins of attention among both researchers and the wider public. Ahataniel Krymski was an outstanding Ukrainian scholar of international stature, an Orientalist, philologist, historian, literary scholar, writer, and translator. He was one of the founders of Oriental studies in Ukraine and the author of more than 1,000 scholarly works in linguistics, literature, folklore, ethnography, and the history of Eastern and European cultures. He was also a remarkable polyglot, mastering dozens of languages, according to some accounts, up to 100, including Slavic, Eastern, and ancient languages, and continued studying them throughout his life. In 1918, Krymski took part in the establishment of the All-Ukrainian Academy of Sciences in Kyiv, alongside Volodymyr Vernadsky and Mykola Vasilenko. He served as its permanent secretary, headed the Institute of Ukrainian Scientific Language, led the Historian Philological Department and several academic commissions, and worked as a professor at Kyiv University. The scope and depth of his scholarly activity were comparable to the work of an entire institution. Throughout his career, he consistently promoted the idea of Ukraine's spiritual and national revival. Despite his non-Ukrainian origin, his father was a Crimean Tatar and his mother Polish, Krymski consciously devoted himself to Ukrainian culture and scholarship. In 1941, his 17th anniversary and scholarly jubilee were solemnly celebrated. However, in the summer of the same year, he was arrested on fabricated charges. 6 months later, he died in an NKVD prison in Kostanay and was buried in a mass grave. He was posthumously rehabilitated in 1957, while his scholarly legacy remained suppressed until the mid-1960s. One of the most significant Yetla studied areas of Krimsky's research in his ethnographic and dialectological work on the historical region of Zvenigorодщина, where he spent his childhood and youth. The result of these studies was the experience monograph Zvenigorодщина, the homeland of Taras Shevchenko, from an ethnographic and dialectological perspective, prepared for publication in 1930 during a period of intense political persecution of the scholar. Ultimately, the book was not published during his lifetime. One of the few surviving copies, bearing the author's corrections and the note revised and print, was preserved in the Zvenigorodka Local History Museum. Thanks to patrons, the work was finally published in Cherkasy in 2009 in a limited edition and immediately attracted considerably attention among historians, philologists, ethnographers, and folklorists. The publication contains unique ethnographic materials collected over more than 40 years, since the 1880s, by the author himself, and a network of the correspondence using specially designed questionnaires. It documents the worldview, beliefs, everyday life, and ritual practices of the people of the right bank Cherkasy region in a language closely reflecting the local dialect. Particular value lies in the careful selection of materials. The author's rigorous control of the accuracy of recordings, as well as detailed commentary and comparative observations, which make the work an important source for the contemporary research. All materials submitted to Krimsky were truly verified in the field, directly in the Zvenigorodщина region, resulting in only a small portion being deemed suitable for publication. Particular interest for our study is the detailed description of the calendar and family rituals in the monograph, most of which have now disappeared from everyday practice and collective memory, as well as the substantial corpus of ritual song texts. From an ethnomusicological perspective, however, a notable limitation of the work is the complete absence of even schematic musical notation, as the primary focus of the monograph was regional dialectology. In this publication, Krimsky presents materials from the more than 40 settlements of historical Zvenigorodщина. Following in his footsteps, we conducted a series of field expeditions to villages of the former Zvenigorodka district, Ryżanivka, Vilchovets, Ozirna, Popivka, etc. Most of these targeted expeditions were carried out in several stages during the summer of 2017, funded independently and in collaboration with Professor Rimantas Liužinskas. The objectives of these expeditions and the subsequent analysis of field materials were to identify songs recorded by Krimsky within their contemporary repertoire and to discover previously undocumented examples, to examine their melodic, rhythmic, textual, and performance characteristics, to compare variants across local traditions, to refine the boundaries of ethnographic regions, and to trace the dynamics of the singing tradition over the past century. Let us now turn to a more detailed consideration of the field materials collected during the expeditions conducted in the footsteps of Krimsky. The number of recorded ritual genre items is presented in the table below. Wedding songs have proven to be the best preserved in this day. Various harvest songs and spring songs have nearly disappeared from active use. Krimsky provides a detailed description of the 8-day wedding ritual along with 422 texts. Importantly, most of the wedding texts documented by Krimsky, the earliest dating back to the mid-19th century, are still preserved in the memory of performance and continue to circulate in adjacent areas of the right bank Cherkasy region. The diversity of syllabic rhythmic types, characteristic of transitional zones, is clearly evident both in the scholars' records and in contemporary field materials. Particular attention is drawn to the modal, melodic, rhythmic, textual, and performance feature of local variants. Among ritual genres, wedding songs remain the most representative and form the basis of comparative analysis. The largest number of examples were recorded in the village of Ozirna and Vilhovets, located near Popivka, whose materials Krimsky used for his ethnographic descriptions of the local wedding. A characteristic feature of most songs, including wedding and kupala songs, is the presence of the tonchik and octave doublet of the main melodic line. Without going into detailed analysis of individual melodic forms and focusing solely on wedding material, we can observe a high degree of diversity and heterogeneity within the local tradition. On the one hand, there is a stylistic features that align ritual song practice with the Middle Dnipro tradition. Melodies with a wide modal range, heterophonic texture with a tonchik, slower tempos in tirade structures, syllabic ornamentation, melismatic elaboration, and a tendency toward more complex compositional forms. On the other hand, clear traits of the Podolian ritual song style are evident, including predominantly monodic texture, narrow range modal structures, and relatively fast yet stable tempos characteristic of Eastern Podolian syllabic rhythmic types. All of these features can also be observed and confirmed in the relatively small number of calendar ritual song samples. While this layer of ritual and folklore is fairly comprehensively represented in Zvenigorодчина, it must be noted that calendar ritual songs have now almost completely disappeared from everyday life and are largely forgotten by performance, with the exception of winter carols, kolядки and щедрівки, which remained active until recent years.
Під дубиною, під зеленою, ой дай Боже, там гора плужок з восьмириною, ой дай Боже, а під тим плужком Петя з батишком, ой дай Боже. Ой, гори, синку, довгою нивку, ой, дай Боже, та насіємо жита пшениці, ой, дай Боже.
The most significant observation is the presence of Звенигородщина of Kupalo and Petrivka songs, representing the principal melotypes characteristic of the region, as well as small number of spring songs. In some cases, spring songs are performed to Kupalo melodies.
Це теж купали.
Співай.
Ти дубе не годи, бо на тобі жолоди, на цей вечір купайла, на вулиці гуляла. Перша зірка ясна, Марія прекрасна, стій дубе не годи, бо на тобі жолоди, на цей вечір купайла, на вулиці гуляла.
The main differences between calendar songs of the same rhythmic type across villages concern their modal structure, texture, and performance style. The Middle Dnipro tradition is characterized by pentachordal structures, the presence of the tonchik and slower tempos, whereas the Eastern Podilian tradition features narrower pitch ranges, unison singing, and rhythmically precise, more rapid tempos. The winter cycle songs combine elements common to both traditions, simple structures and shedrivki, along with distinct local markers, Eastern Podilian tensible carols and Middle Dnipro extended refer shedrivki. The texture of Eastern Podolian songs tends toward monody with elements of heterophony and lively tempos, while the Middle Dnipro tradition is represented by later polyphonic carols of a more solemn character. So, the conducted study confirms the decisive role of Archangel Krimsky in the formation and development of regional ethnomusicological research. His fundamental work not only established a valuable source base for further studies, but also defined key methodological approaches to the investigation of local traditions through the integration of textual precision, field observation, and a broad comparative perspective. Particularly important is the fact that the materials collected by Krimsky remain highly relevant today. A significant portions of the text he documented is still preserved in the memory of performance, enabling direct verification of historical sources in contemporary field conditions. In this sense, his work functions as a bridge between the traditions of the late 19th and early 20th century and the present-day state of folk song practice. Thank you for your attention. Dziękuję za uwagę.
Thank you very much for your informative and valuable presentation. And our next speaker is Oleksandr Kropivny from Rysky Institute of Art Studies and Laboratory of Etnomuzykology, National Music Academy of Ukraine. Today he will be talking about between two cultures and ethnomusicologies in Soviet-occupied Ukraine. If you are ready, or maybe you need help? No?
I need some.
So, we are looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. The USB stick a bit slow, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I'm Very pleased to be here again, and for me it is my topic and the topic of this conference is very timely. I'm currently finishing my dissertation on archiving Ukrainian musical folklore, so talking about something else is a good opportunity, thank you, to take a short break. And today I will talk about the role of the ethnomusicologists in Soviet Ukraine, or more precisely, in Soviet-occupied Ukraine. I use this term because in the case of Ukraine, this is not just about the Soviet period as a neutral time label. It's about the loss of political sovereignty, about cultural policy being subordinated to the central Soviet authority, and about deep intervention of the occupying state into the existence of culture. And in the West, softer euphemistic language is still often used about Soviet Ukraine, but in Ukrainian historiography, this inertia it was also very strong for a long time. But if we look at how Soviet power acted toward Ukrainian institutions, Ukrainian memory, Ukrainian language, Ukrainian traditional culture, the word occupation is not an exaggeration. This perspective is gradually returning to Ukrainian historiography, especially after 2022, when Ukrainian society once again clearly saw how Russian occupation works. It is in this context and Forbes, even the word folk itself could remain. But the content, function, performance context, and the allowed repertoire had to be new, Soviet controlled and politically useful. This situation is best described by the concept of parallel culture formulated by William Knoll in his article A Parallel Culture in Ukraine During the Stalinism Period in 1993. Knoll's main idea is that Soviet power did not limit itself to destroying or marginalizing traditional culture. It created a parallel system that was supposed to replace the living tradition. This system looked folk but functioned under the state control. As a result, traditional culture and Soviet communist culture coexisted as not as two equal systems, but a system and its substitute. The living tradition was pushed aside, limited, and forced to survive on the periphery. Meanwhile, official folk creativity received the stage, resources, and a wide network of distribution. This is why Knoll's concept is very promising for Ukrainian post-colonial studies in ethnomusicology. It allows us to describe Soviet policy as a systematic displacement of the culture by another, artificial one. Mikhail Hay continued this line of thought using Ukrainian material, and in his articles he showed in much more detail how this parallel culture worked in musical practice. If Knoll described the general principles, Hay showed it in action. In instruments, performance style, systems of education, scientific terminology, and stage models, etc. For Mikhail Hay, the main problem is that the Soviet and the post-Soviet official system very often called folk something that had no direct relation to living Ukrainian tradition. He writes especially sharply about the instrumental sphere, and his texts show the same thing. The authentic instrumental style was replaced by a foreign one, imposed through the system of education and the stage in Soviet Ukraine. Now, finally, about the ethnomusicologists themselves. In the Soviet institution, an ethnomusicologist could not be just a researcher. He had to perform several functions at the same time. First, he was a collector who had to produce results and fulfill a plan of government. Second, he was an editor who filtered out everything that did not fit ideological norms. Third, he was an expert who, by his professional presence, legitimized the material needed by the system. Sometimes this was enough, sometimes it was not, and then direct production of pseudo-folklore or folklore began. In the archives of the Institute of Art Studies, there is a large amount of such material. Some of it was collected in the field, for example, from amateur authors who already wrote in the required style. Some of it, according to oral testimonies, was written after expeditions, and there is a recollection passed by Evgeny Fremov, one of the senior researchers of the institute, told how after expeditions researchers would sit together and compose the required socialist repertoire, because in the field they could not find in the amount required by the plan. I do not name their names here, but the principle is important. The system required not simply recording folklore, but producing the necessary volume of correct material. The form of recording is also very telling. Socialist texts were often accumulated in handwritten form. If it was about sound, ideological works were recorded fully, regardless of their length. Meanwhile, traditional genres were often recorded only in fragments, one verse, one short fragment, minimal time. Even more telling is the situation with recording media. High quality types was given for what the system needed. Traditional material was often recorded on already used tapes, sometimes over previous ideological recordings that had lost relevance. That is why today on some recordings we can hear another layer breaking through. For example, a lecture about Trochim Lysenko. He's the Soviet agrobiologist who became a symbol of pseudoscience. On this slide, one such example. And now I want you will hear a high-quality ideological recording from the archives of the Institute. This is a Soviet patriotic songs. It is sung by Yaroslav, born in 1966. The recording was made in 1979, and at the time of recording, the performer was 13 years old.
Сверкают рельсы броско, страну опоясами, планеты Комсомольской, стальные магистрали, Корчагинского сплава, летят электрорельсы, туда, где труды слава, и песня в сердце тесно. Байкаль.
Okay. Soviet pseudo-folklore was not only created, it was also returned back to the village. Through songbooks, manuals, club networks, houses of culture and amateur art, this material was reintroduced in the environment as supposedly folk. And this policy worked. Even in the 1990s, songs about Lenin and Stalin were still occasionally found in the field. Songs that people had learned from these officially distributed collections. Now we will hear a fragment of a session in the village Birki in Poltava region, recorded by Svetlana Kopel and Hanna Krapnichenko. And when asked where the song about Lenin and Stalin as the two falcons came from, the informant answers, we had songbooks, they gave them to us.
А хто це вам навчив цю пісню?
Ну, були у нас писемники такі давали нам.
А, давали пісенники і казали, що ви
Я такий
вивчили.
писемник вдома там оставила в матері. Стоїть дуб зелений, шумить, він гіллями, ой там, два соколи стиха розмовляють.
The topic of communism and folklore requires a separate large study, and other scholars will deal with it. Now I move to another group of ethnomusicologists, those who try to study tradition itself, not remake it according to state demand. A rare telling figure here is Volodymyr Matvienko. And Matvienko recorded folklore of many regions and collected a huge amount of material. It was he who introduced to the professional community the singing tradition of the village Krachkivka in Poltava region. Krachkivka later became one of the most prominent examples of Ukrainian village polyphony, but at first it was simply a living local singing tradition that had to be heard, recognized, and understood. And Matvienko's influence is not limited to its fieldwork. He encouraged many younger research musicians to work with folklore. And in this environment that the Kyiv ensemble Drevo emerged. It was the first urban ensemble in Ukraine that worked with traditional singing. Due to lack of funds, Matvienko recorded his archive on a reel-to-reel tape recorded Mriya, in English Dream, which he jokingly called a terrible dream. According to his colleagues, it was in a very poor condition, especially without a case placed in a suitcase with constant mechanical problems. To make it work, one had to manually adjust the reels, press mechanisms, and improvise during the recording. According to Evgeny Yefremov, Matvienko could literally get magnetic tape from garbage. He knew when a factory threw away defective production waste, collected this tape, glued it together, and used it to record folklore. After Matvienko's death, part of his reels was digitized in the early 2000s. And this work was done by ethnomusicologist Alexander Vovk, who at the time worked as a technician in private art agency Art Vallis. This digitization was done in compressed MP3 format, 128 kilobits per second, with unsuitable equipment, including 4-track recorder instead of 1 of 2-track. The speed was adjusted in WaveLab because the machine could not play it properly, and there were even mechanical improvisations like supporting parts of the tape recorder with stone or a ruler so that damaged tape could pass through. For a long time, it was believed that the original carriers of Matvienko archive were lost. After the first digitization, they have returned to his widow, and after her death, their fate was unclear. In November 2025, with the help of Olena Shevchuk, I managed to find Matvienko's relatives and recover part of the archive. It's about 17 reels. There are now in the Institute of Art Studies, and these carriers are in poor condition. And another difficulty is that Matvienko modified the mechanism of the recorder and may have recorded at non-standard speeds lower than usual. Now we can hear 2 short fragments from the village Krashkivka, digitized about 20 years ago. Both come from Matvienko's archive. The first shows very poor sound quality, and the second is one of the best in this collection. And that's the sound we can hear. There are a lot of another archives, private archives, who haven't any institutional support. It's the Dubravin collection, and the carriers also in a very poor condition. That's digitization of that. And we don't hear any sound at all, I guess. And even in the 1980s, 1990s recordings, we have also very poor and bad quality carriers. That's a tape from the collection of the research laboratory of etnomuzykology in Piątek. And what I want to say, in Soviet Ukraine, there are 2 cultures. Soviet ethnomusicologists had to work within the state system, and he couldn't record folklore for itself. But dissident ethnomusicologist works without full support for the state system, has greater freedom in dealing with the material, but they don't have any financial support, and they didn't have any good equipment or carers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your enlightening and important, in my opinion, presentation. And I would like to invite the next speaker, Professor Dr. Rytis Ambrozevicius, our colleague from Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theatre, Kaunas University of Technology. And he is going to address the topic of roles of actors in the revival of traditional music, Lithuanian case.
Dziękuję. Ale dlaczego to nie mamy tego? Dzień dobry. Ja rozumiem po polsku chyba 80-90% słów, ale but my vocabulary for the presentation is of Polish words is too small, so I will present it in English. Roles of actors in the revival of traditional music. Speaking about the Lithuanian case, and actually, this is the first presentation in my life, in my scholarly career, when no text will be used, only pictures, only photos. Maybe in the very beginning there are some excerpts from works of other scholars. As Ingrid Åkesson describes in some of her works, she sees three types of how traditional music is dealt with in the different modern circumstances. The first, if to go very quickly through the recreation, reshaping, renewal. Actually, myself, I'm in all those three realms as a performer. All those three realms are very interesting, but it is too much for one presentation. So I will deal only with the recreation type of this whole list. In a quite old work, study by Tamara Livingston, she gives a list of necessary, obligatory circumstances, elements which are necessary to create a folklore movement. For instance, an individual or small group of core revivalists, revival informants, and or original sources, and so on and so on. So I will deal with most of those elements, but not with all, in my presentation. And also, I will deal only with some very typical examples, because we can find many examples illustrating those elements, but it would take again a lot of time. So maybe I will omit some of them. And now let me start with the protagonists, with so-called core revivalists. Why not with the sources, because in this process, actually, I think the most important element is namely protagonists of the movement, because speaking about sources, about informants, actually they exist already automatically. It may be manifested as a living, continuing tradition, or maybe some written sources. But folk revival, folk movement could start only if somebody which is interested very much in those activities is born and starts doing those things. So I will start from protagonists. For instance, one of them, Jonas Trinkūnas, the founder of so-called the reconstructed pre-Christian religion in Lithuania. The first event, by the way, pay attention to the jewelry. I will speak about this a bit later. So the first huge event was in 1967, when the Midsummer Festival in Lithuania, it's called Rasos, when it was the first time, but when it was organized, and then the organizers were persecuted by KGB. There were different terrible stories about it. But so this person and its environment brought some new ideas that how the folk tradition could be recreated, reconstructed, maybe not in very wise way, maybe not, but it was very, so to say, one of the core elements in the creating of folk movement. Then we can speak about other person, Zita Kelmeskaitė, so to say, kind of celebrity, star in TV shows, and one of the first organizers of folk ensembles and folk festivals, with the sharp sense of humor and with sharp sense of making some very attractive or ugly things in the public. So both Jonas and Zita, they, I would say, their roles, their important roles were they were as leaders in constructing also folk singing, folk musicians groups, and ensembles, and making one or other kind of festivals or celebrations. Now we must make a note that in Lithuania, and this is the difference from Ukraine, from maybe Poland nowadays, that the folk singing, folk music playing, the style of singing, the style of music playing was not in the focus of those protagonists. The most important thing was to express your Lithuanity. So to sing Lithuanian songs, to sing the melodies, and how you are singing, in what style, and how you are making voice, it was not in the interest of those persons. And so for many years, we didn't, not me, but we as Lithuanian, we were not interested very much in the styles of singing and dialects and so on. Other persons as Kazimieras Kalibatas, Aldona Ragavičinė, also they were as persons who were very remarkable and they were seen on a ground level, and also they were leaders or starters of folk groups. Also, I should remember Norbertas Vėlius. He was a remarkable mythologist in Lithuania, and he, let's see, it wasn't his direct influence on folk groups, but he was very known for his ideas, and so on and so on and so on. And now we go to a younger generation, Veronika Povilionienė, the very well-known singer, Daiva Evaldas Vyčinai, musician and reconstructor of sutartinės, singing his wife and so on. And now we are going to the sources. First we start from informants. Now I will go very quickly through them. So they were so-called the queens and kings of songs, which so say bright stars in this field of culture, and they were one of the most important sources. So say younger musicians took their repertoires to learn, like Navickienė, Zelanskas from Dzūkija, and we see also published CDs and books. Jonas Jakubauskas, actually coming from Poland, from the very north of Poland, where Lithuanian minority lives now. Yes, I know that I have only 4 minutes left, so I ran very quickly. Now maybe I will omit those informants, but also they were kind of starters and kind of the primary sources for folk ensembles, and then sometimes they were leaders of the folk ensembles. But in the very beginning, folk ensembles mostly they took their repertoires from fieldwork, not from archives, not from books, but from those folk stars and from their own fieldworks. Only later they became interested more in the books and in the archives. So some archives in Lithuania where you can find digitalized versions and some books, the maybe most important books of sutartinės and instrumental music, which were used as sources, as publications. Now I will go quickly through Rėza, Liudvikas Rėza, brothers Juška, then barge and so on. Those persons coming from the western part of Lithuania, and huge collections, I will generalize now, huge collections were published of very interesting, very subtle melodies from Lithuania Minor, from the western part of Lithuania, and they were reconstructed with the accompaniment of kankles. Then they are very different from what we can find now in our field work. They sound even like something coming from mid-ages, some very intricate melodies, and Rimas can tell about them more. So publications, CDs and books, and institutions, the two main institutions who take part in providing some materials, seminars, spreading scholarly information to those persons leading the folk groups and working in the countryside is so-called Lithuanian National Culture Center, and the institution which is actually a part of parliament, of our parliament, so-called Council for the Safeguarding of Ethnic Culture. Now, very important thing that, as I have told, the style of singing, the local differences were considered not very important, but the differences in folk costumes, they were considered even more important than the music. So reconstructions of folk costumes were made, and it was an obligatory thing to wear the costume. You can sing not in a correct way, but you should wear the correct costume of that or that region. This is, by the way, our previous president. She came from Aukštaitija. And now, archaeological costumes. Those are mostly used by this part of pre-Christian beliefs in the folk movement, and nowadays they are also very popular. Here, as you see, this is, by the way, I took it from Latvia, and now I should make a note that we do not consider that we have some kind of specific Lithuanian type of this culture, but we call it Baltic culture, so containing both Lithuanians, Latvians, and maybe lost Prussians also. So those movements in Lithuania and Latvia, they are very similar. Jewelry, you can buy it in Kazukas fair. Also, this is also very popular, and you can even, this is a joke that you can even use this very, very archaic jewelry in modern costumes now to make some embellishments to your costumes. Activities, celebrations, Midsummer Fest, and other calendar celebrations, and the most important festival, the oldest festival, Skamba Kantei, which started in 1973, and it is going now. We will have now in a month again. In Kaunas we have Tatarlamžiai, in Klaipėda Parbėk Laivelis, and some so say modern small festivals created from younger generation with the new ideas. Now this is the end of my presentation. With the new ideas and coming back into the informants, making even some, as you see, T-shirts, some other attributes for daily life, and generating completely new ideas, which were not present in our generations. And this is very, very nice that we can see that folk movement is alive, and it gets even stronger and stronger because youngsters are interested in this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation. And we got one more presenter. It is Krzysztof Hliniak, who presents paper Rola kultury, rola jednostki w kulturze tradycyjnej, kilka studiów w przypadku. The floor is yours.
Dziękuję za zaproszenie na konferencję i za zapowiedź. W prezentacji przedstawię kilka anonimowych i kilka nieanonimowych postaci, które stworzą pewną typologię w zakresie ról dziedzictwa i jednostki względem dziedzictwa. Stąd uznałem też, że trochę zmodyfikuję temat mojego wystąpienia, bo to nie tylko kultura tradycyjna, ale ogólnie dziedzictwo kulturowe. Niektóre z tych przykładów wykroczą, właściwie jeden wykroczy trochę poza kulturę tradycyjną, ale jest warty przytoczenia, dlatego że znowuż na tą postać dziedzictwo kulturowe i taniec tradycyjny wpłynęły w istotny sposób. I stąd znalazła się w tym zestawieniu. Można powiedzieć, że pierwsza grupa tych postaci, o których będę mówił, zostały zdeterminowane swoim dziedzictwem. Ich postępowanie, rola życiowa, którą obrały, została, można powiedzieć, w pewien sposób narzucona właściwie, można powiedzieć. Jedną z takich postaci będzie Łemko Ukrainiec. I tak mówił o swoich ścieżkach poznawania dziedzictwa. Bardzo istotne to te pierwsze zdania, które tutaj padają, czyli że ta tożsamość zawsze była i zawsze w domu rodzice nam to mówili. Rodzice zawsze wypychali do tego naszego towarzystwa. My zawsze byliśmy zachęcani. Byliśmy uczeni tańców czy łemkowskich, czy ukraińskich właśnie na tych obozach letnich, na obozach Płastu czy Sarepty. I to pokazuje, że ten obecnie dorosły człowiek, który zawodowo nie jest związany z dziedzictwem kulturowym, jest jednocześnie w tym dziedzictwie wychowany. I jak pokażą kolejne cytaty, to dziedzictwo jest dla niego sposobem właściwie na życie i pewną misją, którą ma realizować. I to bardzo ładnie widać w tym pierwszym cytacie, który mówi między innymi, że więc ja na przykład miałem nazywać nie będę, ale miałem parę osób, które nie były tego świadome, ale ja ich wychowywałem na swój sposób, w sensie ja im pokazałem to, co kiedyś mi było pokazane. bo miałem takie poczucie, że ja muszę im to pokazać, żeby spłacić ten dług, że ja tak ładnie, harmonijnie wszedłem w to towarzystwo, w tę społeczność, właśnie dzięki moim kolegom, dlatego ja też miałem takich parę osób, które wprowadzałem. I jednocześnie to poczucie misji, które tutaj widzimy, wiąże się także z poczuciem dramatu, straty i utraty dziedzictwa, które jest nie do odtworzenia. I to porównanie dziedzictwa do zbitego garnka glinianego, on nie będzie ładny, ten garnek, jakbyśmy go nie kleili, on nie będzie ładny. Po prostu już nigdy nie będzie ładny i nigdy nie będzie kompletny, aczkolwiek próbować trzeba. I to jest bardzo częste w wypowiedziach badanych, którymi rozmawiałem na temat dziedzictwa łemkowskiego, ale nie tylko łemkowskiego, ukraińskiego, a nawet słowackiego czy spiskiego. Kolejna postać również jest, można powiedzieć, obciążona rodzinnie i tym razem to jest Orawiec, człowiek, który w tym momencie zajmuje się zawodowo folkloryzmem, prowadzi zespoły, robi warsztaty, ale to, co robi, wzięło się również z domu. Wielokrotnie podkreślał w wywiadzie, że mama z tatą, tutaj nawet w jednym cytacie mamy to dwukrotnie, mama z tatą tańczyli, jak byli młodsi. Ale też środowisko rodzinne, on chodził, na wesela były całkiem typowo orawskie, od A do Z, z początku za mojej młodości. Później były takie pół na pół, że po prostu była muzyka, no bo u nas jak były wesela, to były takie, że nie było domów weselnych, nie było nic, tylko wesele w domu i wtedy grywano. On tam opowiadał również, że był taki moment przejściowy, gdzie weszły instrumenty elektryczne, big beat i jakby to wesele składało się z dwóch części, z części takiej właśnie nowoczesnej i z tej części tradycyjnej. No ale to, co mówi dalej, potwierdza, że to nie jest tylko i wyłącznie dziedzictwo wyniesione z domu, to jest misja. Misja, która ma charakter właściwie etyczny. Tutaj Weronika Grazdew mówiła o tym aksjologicznym wymiarze ról i to bardzo ładnie widać w tych cytatach. Dobry Orawianin, mamy tutaj jasne określenie sytuacji, kiedy bycie w zgodzie z własnym dziedzictwem jest jednocześnie byciem dobrym, etycznym. I to, co tutaj pod koniec mówił, ja staram się po prostu być taki, po prostu mówił ojciec, był dziadek i ja to znałem z opowieści, czyli być dobrym. I ja staram się, żeby tak było, żeby dalej tak było i tak samo. I w tych kategoriach etycznego też myślenia o dziedzictwie będzie ten drugi cytat po drugiej stronie. Ta ocena, jak on tutaj określił, ja bardzo nie lubię, jak ktoś grzebie w folklorze. Pokazywanie folkloru to jest pokazywanie kultury naszych przodków. I tutaj, jak widzicie, Państwo mają, w tej wypowiedzi jest jasne określenie, do czego się ten mój badany odwołuje. I podsumowaniem tej postawy i postawy bardzo wielu badanych, z którymi rozmawiałem w czasie przygotowania do swojego doktoratu, jest chyba to ostatnie zdanie. Naszym wręcz, że tak powiem, moralnym obowiązkiem jest pamiętać o tym i kultywować to, bo to jest po prostu tradycja naszych przodków, to są nasze korzenie, to jest nasze dziedzictwo. Kolejna grupa osób miała inną historię. To, co te dwie osoby będzie teraz łączyło, to był świadomy wybór na pewnym etapie ich życia. I w tym momencie to już nie tylko jest może nie tyle aksjologiczna wartość dziedzictwa, ale przede wszystkim ta tożsamościowa. Mamy tu wypowiedzi Białorusina, który przeżył bardzo mocno rok 2020 i mówi, że był wstrząs emocjonalny i zaczęło się takie poszukiwanie mocne swoich korzeni. Kim ja jestem, jak się określam, co dla mnie poza językiem, bo język dla mnie był ważny jeszcze przed 20 rokiem. Definiuję siebie jako Białorusin, a nie potrafię określić, jak się tańczy, więc troszkę to też było, ten taniec jest jako motyw poszukiwania własnych korzeni. Też mimo, że w mojej miejscowości tańca się nie praktykuje. I w następnych wypowiedziach widać, że to przekonanie, ta wybrana droga stała się pewnym imperatywem, który napędzał i napędza tego człowieka. To jest też osoba, która nie ma związków formalnych z folkloryzmem. To jest akurat filolog, ale bardzo aktywnie uczestniczy w ruchu tańca tradycyjnego i tworzy środowisko diaspory białoruskiej w Krakowie. I on tutaj mówi, dlatego zacząłem szukać, to zresztą dosyć często się pojawiało. Co jest ciekawe, że ta misyjność wśród tych moich rozmówców wiąże się jednak z pewną zachowawczością, jeśli chodzi o to, co można zrobić z tradycją, dziedzictwem i dorobkiem przodków. Bo podobnie tak jak Orawiec wcześniej, ten człowiek, który świadomie wszedł na drogę uprawiania dziedzictwa, kultywowania dziedzictwa, też mówi, zależy nam na zachowaniu i jest wyraźnie przeciwny jakimś modyfikacjom i unowocześnianiu dziedzictwa. Dlatego zresztą mówi potem nie jakąś modernizacją tańca, tylko właśnie zachowaniem tej kultury tradycyjnej. Dosyć podobną drogę przeszła badana ze Spisza, Słowaczka, która namówiona kiedyś przez koleżankę poszła i zapisała się na Dietwę. To jest taki festiwal i kursy tańca na Słowacji. Bardzo ważne miejsce dla kultywowania tradycyjnego tańca, muzyki i pieśni tamtego kraju. I zapisałam się i dobrze poszłam. Mimo że nie tańczyła. I tutaj mamy właśnie, dostałam się w 2013 roku na Dietwę i wtedy tak mi trochę zaczęły się oczy otwierać i po prostu bardzo się wstydziłam, że nie umiałam wiele rzeczy. Chodziłam każdy rok na te kursy, czyli mamy decyzję, mamy jakby świadome wejście w pewną rolę i to świadome wejście w tę rolę skutkuje tym, że ona potem mówi, że przyszli do niej młodzi ludzie, można powiedzieć w spadku po zespole, który przestał istnieć i zauważyli, że ona jest zaangażowana w to dziedzictwo i zaczęła pracować z zespołem. Tak? Tutaj mówiła, zapraszam, no i tak się zaczęło. Przyszli tak, próba jedna, druga. Ale potem za tymi próbami poszło świadome szukanie, świadome eksplorowanie tego, co jest dziedzictwem i co jest ważne i ratowanie tego, co zostało. Szukamy, poszukujemy. My się zaopiekujemy, my odnawiamy, szyjemy na wzór, historię poznawaliśmy i tak jak mówi, że to nie jest tylko taniec, śpiew, ale będziemy dbać o to, żeby była i regionalna kuchnia, poznawanie tego, co dawniej jedli i sposobu przygotowania i żebyśmy mogli dalej przekazywać. Czyli mamy kolejną postać, która w tym momencie przechodzi jakby ze świadomego wyboru w pewnym momencie do pewnego imperatywu, którym kieruje się w życiu. Zupełnie inną historię będziemy mieć w przypadku zespołu Fiesta Inka i Krystyny i Miguela, bo tutaj odwraca się trochę rola, czyli tamte przykłady, można powiedzieć, że dziedzictwo determinowało postępowanie tych osób. Tutaj osoby, które zajmują się dziedzictwem, właściwie niekoniecznie musiałyby to robić. I to jest ich wybór, ale z drugiej strony jakby jest już pewną, można powiedzieć, w pewnym stopniu kreacją. Aczkolwiek Miguel, mający argentyńsko-rdzenne pochodzenie, z Krystyną zajmowali się prezentowaniem folkloru krajów Ameryki Łacińskiej, głównie Argentyny, Chile, Boliwii i Peru, i prowadzili działania edukacyjne w latach 98-2016, współpracując z różnymi agencjami artystycznymi, domami kultury i centrami oraz organizacjami pozarządowymi. To był bardzo ważny aspekt ich działalności, taka praca związana także z prawami człowieka. Specyfika pracy tego zespołu jednak odbiegała od działalności innych podobnych grup obecnych na polskim i krakowskim rynku. To jest lata 90. to jest okres, w którym dosyć duża liczba imigrantów z krajów Ameryki Łacińskiej przyjechała do Krakowa na przykład. Zespół grał na oryginalnych i wykonanych przez siebie instrumentach, w tym na kilkunastu rodzajów fletów, na przykład kena, masenion, pinkujo, wasta, malta, instrumentach strunowych, charango, banduria, kuskenia, chilador, bębnie, tinia. Zespół wykonywał tańce z regionów takie jak tinku, majakus, tokeada, taniec z diabłem. Pieśni były wykonywane w językach oryginalnych, quechua, aymara, i w strojach, i w maskach oryginalnych lub nawiązujących do oryginalnych. I to jest zupełnie, to było bardzo ciekawe doświadczenie. To są zdjęcia z jednego wieczoru. Jak widzicie, oni są przynajmniej w kilku strojach czy kostiumach. I chciałbym teraz taki fragmencik puścić. Mam nadzieję, że to nam pójdzie. Przesunę może, nie wiem, czy nam się uda. Chyba się nam nie uda, bo tam jest fragment taneczny, ale to pominę. I trzecią grupą, czy można powiedzieć zupełnie odbiegającą od tych przykładów, będzie postać, którą się zajmuje przez ostatnie lata, można powiedzieć, Jacek Tomasik, choreograf, kierownik baletu Opery Krakowskiej, który był absolwentem antropologii kultury materialnej na Uniwersytecie Jagiellońskim. Wśród swoich prac etnograficznych, zaraz tutaj powiem, na przykład omawiał działalność naukowo-badawczą i dydaktyczną w zakresie tańca ludowego w Polsce w latach 45-59. Napisał pracę z kursu instruktorskiego Centralnej Poradni Ruchu Artystycznego Sposoby opisu tańca ludowego w Polsce od XVII wieku do lat 60. XX wieku, ale także wydał skrypt Tańce regionalne, w których zajmuje się tańcami rzeszowskimi głównie. Oraz to, co widzimy na tym nieszczęsnym zdjęciu, które wygląda strasznie, to są pozostałości jego pracy doktorskiej, notatki, kilka redakcji jego doktoratu oraz spisane wywiady z osobami. Praca doktorska na temat tańców mieszczan żywieckich jako wyrazu odrębności stanowej. Co jest ciekawe, w jego biblioteczce zachowało się masa, właściwie 1/3 jego zbiorów bibliotecznych to są prace poświęcone tańcowi, kulturze tradycyjnej. I mamy tutaj Handbuch des Deutschen Volkstanzes, Cante Flamenco, tańce Bali na przykład oraz cały potężny zbiór dotyczący polskiego folkloru, od zbioru pląsów kwaśnicowej po prace wydawane w ramach właśnie Cpary. Ale mimo tego, że artysta rzadko się odwoływał do dziedzictwa, to w roku 1981 stworzył taką choreografię, która nosiła tytuł Obrazek ludowy i oczywiście była twórczym, artystycznym przetworzeniem tego tematu, ale można powiedzieć, że też w jakiś sposób ta kultura tradycyjna, którą znał, tutaj wpłynęła na zajęcie się takim tematem. I możemy, podsumowując, z tych kilku przykładów stwierdzić, że jednocześnie mamy do czynienia z imperatywem, który jest wyniesiony z domu i on skłania do działania. Mamy świadomy wybór, czyli świadome przybranie roli depozytariusza dziedzictwa. Mamy także sposób na utrzymanie się i kreatywne ukazanie autentycznej tożsamości, to co robili Krystyna i Miguel. I mamy również inspirację artystyczną. Jednocześnie te osoby, korzystając z dziedzictwa, w przypadku pierwszych 4 przekazywały i chciały przekazać je swoim następcom i następnym pokoleniom, reprezentowały lub prezentowały dziedzictwo, zajmowały się nim naukowo lub artystycznie i starały się również kreatywnie przetwarzać. To jest pewien bardzo wąski, oczywiście można powiedzieć bardzo ograniczony wybór ról, które na styku dziedzictwa i jednostki można dostrzec i które zauważałem w swojej pracy. To kilka takich, które tutaj wybrałem, najbardziej charakterystycznych i najbardziej dla mnie, można powiedzieć, istotnych dla moich badanych albo dla osób, które tutaj omawiałem. Dziękuję.
Dziękuję bardzo za ten ciekawy bardzo referat. Thank you very much for your presentation. And now it comes time for discussion. So I'm waiting for your questions. We've got some time, so we don't have to hurry up. Nobody want to ask question?
Everything is clear.
Or maybe everybody are tired just after a long day. If not, maybe it's a good idea to discuss during the coffee. And I think that the best idea is just start a coffee break and discuss with coffee in your hands. So enjoy.